Jeff, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge.
Thank you so much for having me.
My hands are sweating right now.
That's good.
Do you know why? Because we were talking about heights before we hit the record button. That's why.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not a heights person, but I do enjoy the mountains, but not nearly, I don't think as much as you do, my friend.
Yeah, I love being in the mountains. I love being outdoors. And yeah, I love having big goals and then working hard and try to achieve them.
That's a little obvious, maybe. I don't know. I'm just judging by your background for those of you guys watching us on YouTube, but I know you're a humble human being, but I want to get to all the things that you've accomplished. And, I obviously just getting to know you just for even the minutes that we spent before we hit record, you come across to me as a very humble human being. And, but I would really like to dive into how this whole thing got started with you and your childhood.
Yeah. So I grew up a normal kid, like everyone else. I grew up in a farm in Wisconsin. And so I was helping my dad one day cut hay, and all of a sudden we hit a rock. And dad asked me to go remove the rock and do something I've done before. And I removed the rock. I went to get back onto my safe spot. And before I reached that spot, my dad turned on the machine. In a split second, my life changed forever. My pant leg became entangled in the power takeoff, and it basically left my leg, completely off. I remember looking to my right, and I could see my shoe or my boot about 10 feet away with my foot still in it. And so I just remember, my dad, stopping the tractor and picking you up, and luckily had the presence of mind to apply a tourniquet, to save the blood from getting out and stuff. But I remember, not being crying because of the pain, but I remember crying because I'd never be able to run or never be able to swim again. As an 8-year-old boy, those are the things I love to do. And so I just remember my dad just kind of, it must have been his worst time ever, just kind of looking me in the eyes and saying, son, let's just get through the day, worry about all the rest of that stuff later. And so for there, they took me to the hospital, and I spent 47 days of my life fighting for it. My heart had stopped on 2 different occasions, so they had to jumpstart me back to life. But it was a pretty hard 47 days. But luckily, I fought through it.
Man, I literally my heart just sank, man, when you shared that. Reason being is because I have an 8-year-old, and that's just I think that's obviously an 8-year-old's one of his worst nightmares, but a father's worst nightmare, knowing that that incident happened on your watch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is your dad still with us today?
No, he actually passed away 12 years ago yesterday. So he's not, but he's lived long enough to, kind of see, what I've become. And it was kind of always one of those weird things with my dad. He's tough love kind of person. So he died of lung cancer, never smoked or never did anything like that. But, being on a farm, he never used the respirator and all the safety equipment. So he developed lung cancer, we think. And he died 12 years ago. But right before he died, I took him out to Colorado. It was this thing he always loved to do, something we always did together. And I wanted him to talk about that day, because it was always that time, he grew up in an era where you just dealt with your feelings, right? You didn't deal with them. And so it was always that big white elephant in the middle of the room. It's like, it's always there, but you can't talk about it. Every time I'd want to say, hey, Dad, can we talk about that day, about what happened to my leg? He'd say, well, how are the Brewers doing? Or, how are the Packers doing? So he'd always change that subject. And so my big goal was to go with him to Colorado and do that last bucket list trip. And I tried to get him to talk about that day. And the only thing he said is, I'm proud of you. I know you had to go through a lot, but I'm proud of you. And he wouldn't say anything more beyond that. So he just kind of always had that, in him. And I think always held that. But I personally never had any ill will towards it, but accidents happen. I didn't really truly understand that until being a parent right now. And so, like you say, when it's on your watch, you want everything to go well. And when it doesn't, how do you respond?
Wow, man. And did you grow up with siblings as well?
Yeah, I have two brothers and two sisters, and my sister's about 14 months younger than I am, so we're best friends even to this day. And so, that's a big community and a big part of who you are and what you are. And so, it was kind of funny when I left the hospital. The doctor said no more sports. They didn't want me hurting myself or hurting other kids, and so it turned out that my sister was the best athlete in school, male or female, and so I was always being there, being supportive to her, and just knowing that, hopefully someday I'll get an opportunity, and I finally did.
My gosh. I'm going to ask you a question, and it's because I literally just had a guest on
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago by the name of Brian Boggart. Have you ever heard of Brian Boggart?
I've not. No.
So Brian, same as you, he's a business coach, motivational speaker for several different companies. His tragedy happened when he was 7, so not far off from yours. And what happened to
Right.
him is he was leaving a grocery store with his mom and brother, and it was a freak accident. There was a guy in a pickup truck. Instead of hitting the brake, he hit the gas, and he hit him and ran over him and ripped his left arm right off. And the reason I'm sharing this story with you is because he brought something to light when I interviewed him that I think we don't really think about in the family unit sense. But what happened with him is there was a nurse that came to his aid right away. She was shopping. She was thinking fast. She told the people inside, go in, get some ice, put his arm on ice, and they were able to reattach it. And he's got some functionality with it. Now, the arm that was ripped off, it hasn't grown. So it still looks like, a small child's arm, but he's got some functionality with it. But the same as you, he was literally in the hospital for weeks. And the thing that he talked about, which was a bit unexpected, was how devastating it was to him, of course, but how this impacted the entire family unit and the ripple effect that it had. And there were highs, there were lows, there was hope, there was sadness, there was relief that he survived, but there was also like, oh my gosh, what's the future going to hold? He said it even impacted the relationship he had with his brother, because his brother was kind of his playmate. Did the same hold true for you?
Yes, it did. It actually really did. So like my sister and I just bonded, like unfortunately, being different, you were picked on as a kid. And so my sister would always come to my aid and, always be my biggest supporter. And, so it was really one of those bonds that'll never be, forgotten and stuff. But, my sister, she like later on, we talked about it, and she goes, it was really hard for me, because all the attention was on you because you were in the hospital, and it felt like everyone kind of left me alone and left me, by myself. And so, yes, that ripple effect is huge. If an illness or an accident strikes a family, it really affects everyone, and it affects everyone in a different way. Like I'll admit, I had a lot of the attention on me because, they had to go to the hospital every single day. And so my sister got tossed around with the aunt and uncles and friends and stuff like that. And, that's pretty hard. And so now being a parent to a special needs child, I am very attentive to how much attention do we give to my normal kid, if you will. And so my sister is very attentive to that. So she takes him, on trips and does things like that just with him, so that she knows that, that sometimes you can get left out. So it's very true.
Interesting. And, it blows my mind that kids can be so cruel.
Yeah,
It
no,
really does. So, I grew up overweight, and that sounds terrible because obviously what you had to go through, not even comparison, right?
but it's 100% though. It's what affects you,
Right.
all of them different things. I'm missing my leg and maybe you were a little overweight or something, but that we're different. Right. And
Right.
so,
But the thing that I was going to share was this, is that, I was overweight. So I was bullied a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, I feel like that's kind of minor because it's kind of a low hanging fruit for bullies, right? That the fat kid is always an easy target. Right. And I don't want to say this is the wrong choice of words, but that it's forgivable or passable because we see it so much. Right. But when we see somebody who definitely has something maybe, that was devastating that happened to them, and they're still targeted to be bullied, that I feel like there's no forgiveness for that. My 8-year-old, he suffers from tics, really
Okay.
bad. And I remember growing up, and I remember I didn't bully anybody. Right. And I wouldn't
Right.
think to, but even, let's just say I was, maybe if I was a bully, I think I would draw a line in the sand and be like, well, that kid has a certain ailment. I'm not going to pick on that because that's just freaking cruel, man. And then the same with this. So it really blows my mind sometimes, the lack of filter or the lack of just self-awareness just some kids have. I'm like, my God, like how cruel. I know you're a kid, but
Right.
how cruel can you be that you're going to pinpoint this person? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember getting tripped in the hallways and stuff like that. But I was, yeah, but I was lucky. I had a tough love dad. And so, he kind of empowered me a little bit too. He goes, next time you get pushed down, you push him back.
Yeah.
And so, he said, you're going to have to learn how to stand up for yourself because, you can either be pitiful or you can be powerful, but you can't be both, And so it was just kind of that mindset. It was like, all right, you're different, accept it, embrace it, put your best foot forward and move on.
I want to make sure everybody heard that. You can either be pitiful or powerful, but you can't be both. I like that a lot. I'm stealing that from you and your dad, if you're okay with that.
Go for it. But it's true though. I mean, we all have a choice. You had a choice when you were being bullied too. Did you let it affect you, or do you let hey, this kid's having a bad day, I'm going to move forward.
Right.
Instead of letting that destroy you.
Agreed. Yeah. And, I think it's very easy for parents, like anybody would give your dad a pass and forgive him for be like, no, just, be easy on him, give him empathy. But instead, he was a little tough. The same thing Brian said about his mom. His mom was like insanely resilient. He remembers trying to learn how to tie his shoes, and he didn't really have full functionality of that one hand. And he's just bawling and crying. And she's like, you need to learn how to do this. Like,
Figure it out.
we got to figure this out. And then he remembers her leaving the room, and she told him years later that she would go in the other room and just sob, but she didn't want to see him. She didn't want him to see her crying. But I think sometimes teaching that tough love, and this as well, you've got 2 kids, you've got Grace and Gavin, teaching tough love. I think our kids really think that it's easy, but it's very hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah, it is. And I think like when I left the hospital, my mom, was kind of tough love too. She was talking to my nurse, one of my favorite nurses there before I left, and she took my mom aside and she said, you know what? The biggest enemy of a kid with a disability are their parents. They can either choose to do everything for them, or they can choose to let them be independent. And so she said exactly like the other guy that you just mentioned, that she would go into the bedroom and just cry. She'd want to make things easier for me, but she knew that wasn't the right path. She knew I had to figure it out in my own way.
Wow. God bless your mom and your dad too. Let's talk about this playing it safe. The doctors, you're in the hospital. You should stay away from sports. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. We need to play it safe. The story I'm telling myself is that's just not who you are, Jeff.
Yeah, that's who I was. That's who I was. So I was conditioned to be that way by the doctors and others. If I didn't really put myself out there, if I didn't really try, then nothing bad would happen. And so, they always said, I couldn't play sports because they didn't want me hurting myself or the other kids. And so in Phi class, I got to keep score for the other kids or lift weights alone. And so those were my big choices. And so I was always told to play it safe, don't get yourself out there. And it's kind of funny. One time I cheated on that whole philosophy. I decided to play kickball with my classmates one day in the schoolyard, and my leg was held with Velcro. And so I went to go kick the ball, and I kicked the ball, and my leg went about 20 feet up in the air and came back down. I'm like, okay, that's why I don't play sports, and so because everyone laughed, and so I did too, because you have to do it, but it's one of those things. Like the one time I tried to do a sport, then I got put in my place. Things didn't happen right.
So you've done several things in the sporting arena at this point.
Not at this point, no. So I didn't get to do any sports whatsoever until college.
Right.
So yeah. And
right. So, and that was actually my question. What was it? What was the line in the sand for you that you're like, I'm I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and
Yeah.
try this. What was the decision, the switch that flipped?
Yeah, I believe everything in life happens for a reason. And so this was kind of a chance encounter for me. My leg was hurting one day in college and I was studying. I had to hop to the restroom, and all of a sudden hopping down the hallway towards the restroom, and this kid stops me. He's like, "You're missing your leg." So I'm right. Yeah. This guy was, the valedictorian of his class, hey, way to state the obvious, Einstein. But then he's like, "Well, let's go play wheelchair basketball." I'm like, "They play basketball in wheelchairs? Never heard of such a thing." And so I got to see him play wheelchair basketball for the first time. And I was just completely in love with it. But, I fell into the trap that we all do, that we want to be good or want to be successful at right away. But that wasn't me. And so luckily I had a coach that kind of believed in me right from the beginning, and working with him. And I was very fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. And it was evident that I was a natural athlete. And I was happy to make a U.S. national team after playing for 3 years.
Wow. What was it like? Tell me about the first time that you played the game. What did it feel like?
Like I was learning how to walk again.
Yeah,
like
I bet.
I was a kid. Like I was like, I finally found something that I was passionate about. Finally found something that if I worked hard, I could get good at it. And then my sister could come watch me play, kind of thing. And so it was just really amazing. And I'm a passionate person. And so once I get involved in something, I am 100%, the whole time. So I started training 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. I was doing what I could to realize my dream, because they don't just happen on their own. You have to wake up and actually work for them.
Wow. 6 to 7, 8 hours a day.
Yep. I was going to college and going to class, and we were playing ball the rest of the time.
That is unreal. Did you ever feel like you were making up for lost time? And that's the only way I know how to word that question, because the story that I'm telling myself is, if you were watching other peers play sports, and you're like, man, I just wish I could do that. And then you get a taste of it and you're like, hell yeah, this is what I've been wanting. What was it?
100% like that. Like everyone, like my teammates are like, well, you don't need to be in the gym that much. I'm like, I got to catch up. I'm like, I need to learn it. I never sat in a wheelchair. I had to learn that part of it. I never had, I never really shot a basketball. I rebounded from my sister, but that was about it. And so I was making, just like you say, making up for lost time. And man, I loved every second of it. But I really think that all that hard work and stuff all come down from living on a farm. I was taught the value of hard work and the importance of, getting up every day, being consistent, and then setting goals and then get that to-do list done.
That is so cool. And you went to the Olympics.
Yeah, the Paralympics.
Right.
Yep. So,
right.
Yep.
The Olympics. Yeah. So how did
three times?
3 times. Tell me about the first time that you thought that this was actually a dream that was actually in your grasp. What was that like?
Yeah, well, it was awesome, because I got invited to a tryout. There were 100 people invited, but only 12 people got to make the team. And so it was super competitive, but I knew that if I worked hard and had a good attitude, that I could do it. And then I made that team, and then I really never looked back. Then I set the goal of, I don't just want to be on the team. I want to be one of the best players on the team. And then I want to set records on the team. And so for me, it's like, yeah, here's one level. Okay, now what's the next level? And so for me, it's always been about, living in the moment, being present, sure. But I'm going to look that's clear up there. What's down the road that I can attack?
Can we go back to a moment?
Yeah.
Okay. You've seen the movie Rudy, right?
Rudy, yes.
Yeah. That part where he gets the letter in the mail that he made it into Notre Dame. Like I've seen the movie 80 times probably at this point. Right. That part, and obviously the end, always like it, I get misty eyed, cause it's like all that work, all that grind that he put in, he finally made it. What was it like when you were notified that you were going to be on the team?
Well, they brought all of us into the room, and then they read the names off the list. And so, you were hoping some of your friends made it, and then sometimes they didn't. But the second, my name was called out first, and so I didn't have to wait too long. But I just remember just being overjoyed. Like you say, all that work, all that belief in myself, all the other people that believed in me kind of came to fruition in that one moment. And so that was kind of the big culmination. And then I wanted more.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment where, this was your life since you were 8 years old, right? Playing it safe, people telling you what you can and can't do. Then suddenly you get to college and you're playing on this team and you're working your rear end off, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week sometimes. And then you make the team. And then I think when we're very highly driven people, all we're doing is, yep, I made the team. Okay, cool. All right. Now I got to compete. Okay. Now I got to do this. Okay. Now I got to do this. Now I'm going to do this. It's like that next thing that we're so focused on. Did you ever take time to be like, wait a second, time out? And I'll refer this back to, cause I want to hear about the mountain journeys, right? You and I have both, summited mountains, mine much smaller than yours. But one of the things when I took my kids on our journey to the 14er that we did, Bierstadt and Quandary, I told them before we started, I said, we're going to take our time and we're going to stop strategically and we're going to take a look around, because it's so important that in life and on this mountain that we're going to be so focused on making it to the top of that mountain. We're going to see it. We're going to see it. We're going to see it. And we're not going to, unless we are intentional about stopping and acknowledging and appreciating where we're at, the beauty that's here. We're going to look down and recognize where we came from. We're going to acknowledge that and we're going to appreciate that. Were there moments in there where you had just a pause of like, this is really good and I'm really grateful for it?
I would say, unfortunately, no. I was always so focused on the next one because I just felt like I was really playing catch up. I really had to make it for lost time. And so now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was a cool moment, and then like winning, we won the world championships twice. And so those moments, I soaked it all in, because that was the end of that journey and the start of another. And so, yes, but I do think that's one of the downsides that I do have is by being so driven, a lot of times, you miss what's right in front of your face as far as my athletic goals go. But as a parent, I realize that that's not what I need to do. And so I am lucky I'm able to separate, that as well, because being a parent is much different. I'm a different parent than what my parents are. And I think that's good. And I think we as humans need to evolve, because, kids these days, need, sometimes it's not the tough love that gets through to them. It's, it's the support and love and the nurture that really helps them develop who they are.
And I can't wait to tie all this into parenting, because I think it's going to be absolutely spectacularly beautiful. Talk to me really quickly about, well, not really quickly, but talk to me about the time playing basketball and on the Paralympic team and the year spent there and some of the lessons you learned there. And then I really want to transition into how in the world did you go from that to mountain climbing?
Yeah, well, I have Ironman triathlons in between there. So
right.
Yeah. So life's about that journey, evolution for sure. But for me, I got to be a part of a lot of, really cool teams. I had the opportunity to play professionally overseas. So I played 2 years in Madrid, Spain, and 1 year in Rome, Italy. And so that was just a great experience because, I was told when I got to my club in Spain that none of them spoke any Spanish, and I knew I didn't speak, or none of them spoke any English, and I knew that I didn't speak any Spanish. So I'm like, well, how is this team going to work? Communication is a big part of, who we are and what we're about. But it was really neat. After the first day, this one teammate of mine was getting in and scoring at will. And so I'm a competitive person. So I went to my locker and I got out my English to Spanish dictionary and stumbled and fumbled about how to communicate with my new teammate. It was really cool the next day that my new teammate went out and got a Spanish to English dictionary and found a way to communicate with me. And so I think the coolest thing about being on a team is that, we all have different backgrounds, educations, and, experiences and beliefs. But when you bring that all together, really amazing things can happen. And so we won the European Championships and the Spanish Cup. And so it was a really cool just experience, because I'm like, how is this going to work? We're on completely different worlds, and then at the end we were all on the same page and we were all winning.
I love it, man. What was it? I got to ask this question. It's doesn't have much to do with obviously all these amazing accomplishments and lessons learned and all that stuff. What was it like living in Spain and Rome?
It was incredible.
Yeah.
They have a different, like a family unit than what we do here. And so, they all walk together as a family. They all, participate in things together as a family. I think sometimes now, like, family members just kind of go in their separate directions once they get older. But there, it's a huge appreciation for the older folks, if you will, and they're kind of the patriarch, the matriarch, and that's very, very important. And so just the culture and the people and the kindness, and it was a great experience.
That is so cool. So it's on my bucket list to go to those places. I've never been there.
Do it.
But I was so curious. I just had to know. So basketball, and then you transition after basketball into the Ironmans, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I saw the Ironman World Championships on TV. And so, since I lost my leg, I was told I couldn't run and couldn't do that stuff. And those were my favorite activities. And I saw that program. I'm like, I have to do this. And so it was kind of the same thing as I got a running leg, and I remember running for 100 yards, and I was so proud to be able to run again. I'd take my leg off and it was bloody from one end to the other. It didn't fit right. And so we had to go back to the drawing board. It's kind of like NASCAR. You kind of have to set your leg up in a certain way for it to perform and all of that. And I remember the second time I ran, the goal was to run 200 yards. And so I ran 200 yards. And again, my leg was bloody. But it's kind of true with anything in life that we do is, you start small, you work hard, and consistency will get you to where you want to be. And so I've done 25 full Ironman distance races. So that's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon 26.2 mile run. So a long day and a long way, and but a big challenge and in a big community. And so it's really cool to see, how positive everyone is to get to that finish line.
Reflect back after all, and you said how many of those races you've done?
I've done 25.
25. Okay, so let's reflect on the 25.
Yeah.
Tell me about the one that was most meaningful and why.
Yeah, the one, oddly enough, is the one I didn't finish. So I should have had 26. It was, I'm not big for excuses, but I did Ironman Louisville in 2010, and it was really hot, like 96 degrees. And on the bike ride, they ran out of water, the water supply at about mile 45. I didn't have any water and they didn't have any water. And so I kept on pushing, and it's really hot. And then I got depleted on mile 18 of the run. I passed out and woke up in a hospital. So I kept on pushing, and my body finally said, no, thank you. But luckily I was fine after that, except for disappointed I didn't accomplish my goal.
What did you learn from that?
That maybe I should have stopped and asked for water earlier on some farm or something. So I'm not a big one on excuses. So if they didn't have it, I needed to find it. And so, or maybe I just probably should have pulled out of the race, but I'm kind of stubborn and I trained for it and I wanted to do it.
Wow. Let's put the excuses thing on the shelf, because I want to hit that. I want to hit that hard. I want to get to mountain climbing, but I want to come back to excuses because we see that, my God, everywhere. So did then the Ironmans, did mountain climbing come after that?
Well, so it's kind of a roundabout way with my daughter. We can talk about that later, but she's special needs. But Grace has a seizure disorder where, not too many people have it. There's like 5 people that do. And so she'll have seizures all the time. And what we learned, like if she's involved in something different, she won't have as many seizures. And so we were living in Colorado. We moved out there for treatment for Grace's seizure disorder. And then we were invited to climb at this disabled climbing clinic. And so for 2 hours, we climbed there, and Grace never had a seizure for 2 hours. And so it's kind of rare. And so when her brain and body's, involved in something new, she won't have as many seizures. But the second she learns it, the second it becomes familiar, then the seizures come back on. But for those 2 hours, it was a slice of heaven, And so I just kind of fell in love with climbing after that. And so, she kind of introduced me to that. I really believe that everything in life, is a chance encounter. And so, she took me there because we were trying to do something different. And I discovered that new passion. So it was a really cool beginning.
What was the first climb you guys did?
So, well, we climbed at the indoor climbing gym. So it's called Earth Trek. So indoor gym. And then 2 days later, I was invited to climb the Grand Tetons, a pretty technical climb, in Wyoming. And it was funny, like the group, it was all disabled athletes and stuff. And the group leader said they'd been training all year to climb the Grand Tetons. And they had one teammate fall and break a leg. And so they had a spot available, and they knew that I'd never climbed before other than that night, but they were leaving 2 days later. And so, they invited me for that climb. And so in my life, I try never to turn down an opportunity. And so I took him up on that opportunity, and 2 days later we went and summited the Grand Tetons. And so I love that so much that, 2 months later, I summited Mount Aconcagua, the highest peak outside the Himalayas in South America. So one of the 7 summits. So, but then standing on top of that summit, I'm always thinking of the one next. And I was talking to my guide, and he'd climbed Mount Everest, and he goes like, you have the body type and the mindset to do it. He goes, I would do it, but I would do it right away. And so I did, but he was my mentor in that, but, he sadly passed away a year after he was guiding me. He was caught in a snowslide climbing, an 8,000 meter peak, and they never found him.
Oh my gosh!
So it's a stark reminder of it's dangerous. You can be prepared, you can be the top of your game, but bad things can still happen.
Wow! So Mount Everest. What year did you do that?
2016, summited on May 19th, 2016.
Okay. So I've seen, I think at this point, I'm fascinated by Everest.
Yeah.
I love mountains in general. I just watched the documentary called 14 Peaks. I don't know if
yeah. Awesome. NIMS.
Yeah. NIMS. I thought he was fascinating, but I'm the thing that, fascinates me about a mountain like Everest is, I mean, the list is quite frankly just way too long. Like the technicality behind it, the acclimation behind it. The base camp all the way up to, I think it's Camp 4 is the last one before you summit, correct? But I'll never forget when I was working a full-time job in medical device sales, we had Eric Weinmayer, who's been on the podcast as well. He's blind, and he summited it as well. And we had another speaker come a couple of years later who had summited, and she had summited, and she had talked in detail about just some of the things her body was going through, her mind was going through. But tell me about what it was like when you arrived at base camp and you set your eyes on that peak for the first time. What was going through your mind? What
did I get myself into?
Okay, I just wanted to remind myself that he's still human, right?
No. It's a big endeavor, and it's something that I didn't take lightly. But I really feel like everything that I do in life, I take it seriously. I want to be prepared to the fullest amount, and so I think that's the most important part. There are a lot of people that show up to climb Mount Everest that just have a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of technical skill. They don't have a lot of physical, presence there. They show up, heavier and out of shape. And the nice thing about that is it sorts people out. When you get to base camp, if you get a cut in your finger, it could be game over. If you can't sleep at night, it could be game over because, your body, has so much battery. And if you're not recharging when you need to recharge and you're not ready to go when you need to ready to go, you're not going to make it. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was in the best shape of my life and I was physically prepared and mentally prepared more than anything. That's the hardest part.
Was there any part of the climb where you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there was. So we got caught into a storm going from camp 3 to camp 4, and we had 60 to 70 mile an hour winds that knock us down. We get back up and then we get knocked down again. And so in that moment, it's like, your back is against the wall and the only thing you can think about is, just that next step forward, because that's the most important step. And so, but I think the hardest part was just every single day you had to be positive. Every single day you didn't know if you were going to move up, if you were going to stay the same, or you were going to go back down the mountain. And so, we were caught in like a weather hold, if you will, for 6 days at camp 2. And in 6 days, I lost 20 pounds. And so, when you're at that altitude, you don't feel like eating, you don't feel like drinking, and your body is just slowly deteriorating. And so, but me being an amputee, that makes things harder because my leg is designed to weigh a certain weight. And so when I lose all that weight, it fits differently and feels differently. And so I just had to be really attentive and make adjustments and changes to my leg as well.
I didn't even think of that, that would even be a factor. But yeah, so at that point, after the 6 days, 20 pounds, what kept you going?
What kept me going? Just the will to get to the top. I mean, I had spent a lot of time, energy, and so did my family, of helping me pursue this goal. And so, but more than anything, I wanted to be safe. We have this rule in mountaineering, you probably heard of it, is that you don't make it to the peak and miss the point. Because you want to get home to your family. Getting to the summit is one thing, but getting home to your family is the most important thing. So I knew that, that I was physically strong enough to be able to climb that. And so mentally, I just had to be, in tune with what was going on and then make the right choices.
So what did it feel like for you? I mean, so you're a driven human being, right? You have really emulated that on this podcast. You're a driven person. It's like, all right, I did this. Okay, next thing. All right, I did this. Next thing. What was the feeling when you were up there?
It was, for me, it was the biggest moment of gratitude. I think, I set all these big goals. I try to do all these things, but it's never just me. It's a great team of people, behind me, with me, and in front of me to help me stand on that moment. And so it's one of the coolest things. They say that like on a clear day at sea level, you can see for about 12 miles into the horizon. At the summit of Mount Everest, like a clear day that we had, you can see for 1,200 miles. And so I always like to say, what view in life are you looking for? Are you dreaming big enough, or are you, just kind of getting to that little peak and then, I made it, And so for me, it's always been about, that journey for one, but that huge gratitude of, standing there. But it wasn't just me standing there. It was my wife, my family, my kiddos, everyone that believed in me and helped me get to that point. My Sherpas, my team captain.
That's incredible, man. So I know I was going to save this to the end, but I want to talk about it now because we're talking about summiting the Mount Everest, and basically your entire childhood, play it safe, don't do anything drastic or risky or anything like that. You go to the Paralympics, you're doing 25 Ironmans, almost 26. You make it to the summit of Mount Everest along with other peaks that you've done as well. And, the world, Jeff, I don't need to tell you this. The world is full of excuses. And to be quite honest, excuses drive me crazy, absolutely crazy. And I'll be very, very blunt with you about what I see. When I see men, right? And maybe I get so upset with it because I was that person. But I see men, husbands and fathers, and they just don't, I see a lot of tire kickers in the world, and a lot of men who share the story of why they can't. And sometimes I shake my head and I'll be like, you have no idea what potential you have. You need to believe differently.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have on people who just are filled with excuses?
Well, first of all, I think they're probably surrounding themselves with the wrong people. I feel like I've been very, very fortunate to have people that help build and bring me up. So I can't speak for their excuses or their reasons, but I've never been one, I always think it's, extreme accountability for yourself. The biggest test you can do is look in the mirror. Are you happy with that? If there's something you need to change, then are you willing to make that change? And so for me, I've never been one on excuses. My family has never been either. It's like, all right, if this is your goal, let's provide some opportunity on how to pursue that goal, and, I think the excuse makers or your tire kickers, if you will, I don't think they have the right people in their corner. I don't think that maybe that they have, the right support network with them, but maybe if they do, honestly, there people are like air. There's good air and there's bad air. And so, I think that, the good air, the people that build you up and bring you up, and that bad air is that those negative people, those naysayers, the, people that don't believe in you. And so I think they need to surround themselves with better air if they're coming up with all these excuses.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, which, by the way, I've never heard of bad air and good air, but I really, really like that a lot. And also because, if we're not spending time with the right people in our life, we call it obviously a group of like-minded men.
Right. Yeah.
And you're not going to, you're going to, gosh, how did I put this to my kids? Cause my boys are 16 and 14, I believe the same age as Gavin and Grace,
Right.
my two older ones. And we have a lot of conversations around peer groups. And, for a while I saw one of my boys, and I'm not going to mention who, cause we have a lot of people know me and know my kids, and they'll know which one I'm talking about. But I saw, one of my kids starting to hang around with a group that was going in a pretty not so great direction. Right. And I told my son, cause he got caught up in a little bit of trouble at one point, and immediately we stopped all that. But I told him, I was like, you need to choose your circle of friends very, very wisely, my friend. And I'll tell you why. You're either going to rise to the best person in the group, or you're going to fall to the lowest. And I was like, and unfortunately, that's not only with teenagers. Okay. I was like, that's life. Right. Yeah. So give me some examples, Jeff, in your life where you had the right people. Obviously Everest is one, but give me a couple more where you had the right people in your corner, and it made all the difference for you.
Right. So for me, like what you were talking about, my dad always used to say, you can't soar with the eagles, hanging out with the turkeys. And so, his big thing was like, make sure you're hanging out with people that are bringing you up. But yeah, no, I've been very, very fortunate to have the right people in my group. I think that's one of the lucky curses that I've had. And so I had that coach that believed in me, right from the beginning. He became my first mentor and just kind of put me on a path. And that path was, work hard and set big goals and have a strong foundation. You can do anything. And so I've done that. But then I think more than anything, is my wife. She has always believed in me, and she's always let me be me. And I think that that's kind of the biggest thing is that, we're going on 20 years of marriage. And I think that's the greatest thing. People say, what's your wife like? How does she let you do this? I'm like, well, she knew that I was crazy before I met her. She doesn't want to change me, or she doesn't want to make me different. And I think that, that is probably the biggest gift that I've ever had, is I've never had to change. Once I found out who I am, I've never had to change, who I am. And so I've not had to, curtail some of my goals, and that. And so I think that that's kind of the biggest support that I've had is my wife. It's a partnership, and there's great days, there's good days, there's, every day in between. But we have each other's back. And I think that that's probably the biggest blessing I've had in my life.
She knew what she was getting into.
She did. Yeah. It was kind of funny how we met. She was a fundraiser for Charlotte Institute of Rehab. She was in charge of this event. And it was a 200-mile, it's called Cycle to the Sea. Have you ever seen those hand crane bikes? Yeah. And so we had to do 200 miles. And my sponsor at the time, like, hey, they need athletes to do this event. I'm like, I've never done 200 miles, let alone, been in a hand crank bike or anything. You're like, you have to go. And so my wife's in charge of the event. We're at this Walmart parking lot and it's starting to downpour. And my now wife, she goes, well, we're going to have to move everyone 5 miles down the road so we can start there because it'll be safer. And so I raised up my hand and I said, I signed up for 200 miles, not 195. And she goes, all right, you can go around in the parking lot for 5 miles. We'll load you up with the group and then we'll start from there. So she kind of put me in my place that day and really every day since. So it's kind of fun, that self-love too.
That's a cool relationship, man. That is really cool.
Yeah.
And then
I hope everyone has that.
What's that? Sorry.
I hope everyone has a relationship like that because that's really, allows you to do great things.
It really does. And, it's actually a perfect segue because what I really want to do over the next few minutes is really encapsulate your childhood, encapsulate some of the experiences there, some of the things you learned from your parents. Also thinking about your time playing basketball in the Paralympics, your time training for these Ironmans, right? And then also summiting not only Everest, but several other monster peaks as well. You've done all these amazing things. Now, let's put this through the lens of a man, husband, and father raising, Grace and Gavin, being married to Elizabeth. How do you take all this knowledge, all this experience, and then how do you show up as a man, husband, and father?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I can do is just be, I don't just talk it, I do it. And so I want to be, a role model to my son and my daughter that, if they set big goals, work hard, they can see that I work hard. I wake up every morning, between 4 and 4:15 and I start working out then. And so I do a couple hours in this little gym here and then get the kids ready and we go to school and then I come back and work and work out again. And so for me, it's just being a role model. I think more than anything, it's not just saying what to do, but being an example. My son can see that, I work hard. And so he's just starting to get into basketball. He is 14 and now is 6'2". And so the basketball is kind of taken off, and so he's now it's kind of fun because being a parent, my dad always pushed me, like it's funny when I played wheelchair basketball, I'd score 50 points in a game. My dad would go, yeah, but you missed 3 layups. That was and so I chose not to be that pushy kind of like forceful. You need to do this. You need to do this. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to provide opportunity. And then I want to see, what sticks, and so luckily by not pushing basketball, he's into basketball. So yes, so that's pretty cool.
Wow, man. I'll share a statement with you that I've heard from several guests and I love it. The best lessons are caught, not taught. What does that mean to you?
Well, caught, not taught is like, it's like when you're out there in it, you don't really know what you're out there in for. And so by the biggest lesson in life is this experience. And so, I don't want to take all those experiences away, like tell my son, don't do that. Don't do that. I want to keep it in between the ditches for sure, but he's got to fail and he's got to, learn from that failure, because we can't all be successful at everything, and so I think the biggest thing in life is, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at, and then kind of seeing what sticks after that. But for me, it's like, I've learned more by failing than I ever have by succeeding.
I love that, man. We have a saying in this house, which is, fail fast, learn fast.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and I was terrified of failure. And my oldest in particular, he doesn't like to fail. And sometimes he can be at a standstill, with making a decision. I'm like, just make a decision. It's okay. Just remember, you either win or you learn. Fail fast, learn fast. It's okay. Right.
But if you stay positive, you can learn faster and you can go faster. Yep, exactly.
Exactly, man.
Another time that I failed too is at the Boston Marathon in 2013 when the bomb went off. I was about a quarter mile. I was a quarter mile from the finish, and luckily I had a problem with my leg, and so I had to make a last final step, a leg change rather. And so it delayed me a couple minutes. And so luckily, if that wouldn't have happened, I would have been right there at the finish line right then and happened. But so that's another time that I failed, but I didn't take that. Well, I failed because I wasn't allowed to proceed to the finish line. You know, the police officer stopped everyone right then and there. And we didn't know really what was going on. You know, we heard about it. And then later on, you know, a few minutes later, we're like, oh no, this is really serious and really bad. But I took that experience and I found two other amputees. You know, instead of failing, I met and found two other amputees that never ran before, and I trained them and mentored them. And then the following year, we ran the Boston Marathon together. And so we met some of the people that lost their limbs and stuff from the bombing and stuff. So it was really cool. Just, you know, take what was, you know, it was my Super Bowl of running. You know, I wanted to go to the Boston Marathon and then not getting to that finish line, but you know, taking that failure and bringing it home and finding two other people and inspire them and challenging them. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do in life is like, if we have that failure, you know, like you say, fail early, fail often, but learn from it and bring people along with you to help to the finish line.
Man, last segment I really want to cover here, which by the way, I love that that's the way you go about parenting. Because man, I see this all the time. My 6-year-old just started his first kind of competitive soccer team, and you know I've kind of been down the road, you know, with my two older boys, where I was kind of like the ashamed to even say is like you're coaching from the sidelines. I just shut up now. I don't say a word, right?
No, that's not my job.
Yeah, right. And I see these parents one dude in particular. I'm not even kidding, man. Comes off the bench and he walks up and down the side of the field and coaches his kid. It's like he's terrified of his kid.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking bad.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you stated that. Last and final thing I want to cover here is marriage. So you have Grace, you're raising, you know, a beautiful young woman, Gavin, strong young man. The way that Jessica and I go about our marriage, and you and I have been married for about the same amount of time, but the way that Jessica and I go about marriage is that my boys are going to learn how to love a woman by how they see me operate with their mom. My wife has a view of like, my boys need to see how a woman treats a man well by how I treat their dad. And the bar is set very, very high. And for us, that is something that is so important because we feel our view is that we are this walking, talking, moving movie example of like
life.
This is a functional relationship, and do not settle for anything less than this. So as you think about Grace and you think about Gavin, think about Elizabeth, how do you go about marriage and teaching these two kids about relationships?
Yeah, I think everything is about respect. Like we have this rule in our family is, I don't know if I can say it, but you might be able to edit out. Don't be an asshole.
That's fine.
Yeah. And so that's what we do. You know, don't be a bad person, you know, if you will. And so treat everyone with respect, whether it's, you know, your principal, whether it's your grandparent, you know, down here in the South, you know, we like to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And, you know, and be kind of that way. And I always open the door for my wife. And so my son will see that if I'm not there, sometimes he'll open the door for her. And so I think that that's important. Those are things that, you know, like you say, be that role model, be that, you know, respect, or that not even high bar, a normal bar, you know? And so I think that never settle for anything, you know, and I think that's the best thing you can teach your kids is, you know, I want my son to have, you know, do more and be happier than I am, you know? And so, you know, that's our job as a parent to provide that opportunity and let them, you know, go with whatever dream they have.
Man, I love this. Gentlemen, again, we were talking to Jeff Glasbrenner. He's also the author of The Gift of a Day. As we close out here, what I'd love for you to talk about was, what was the inspiration behind that book?
Yeah, it's kind of just my life experience. You know, I think that, you know, bad days, you know, happen to all of us, but, you know, you can't let that bad day turn into a bad week, a bad month, a bad year, or a bad life. You know, I think every morning when we get up, you know, do we look at the day in front of us as full of opportunity or is full of obstacles? And so I think that, you know, if you can wake up every morning and, you know, hey, I get to do something rather than I have to do something, that's so many more opportunities will come your way. And so that book is just about my journey and some of the experiences that I've got to live through. So life is good. And so, every day is that gift.
That is so awesome, man. I want to make sure that the audience can find you if they want to connect with you, your book, your resources, if they want to follow you. Do you,
Yeah.
I'm even nervous. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. You said you're afraid of heights a little bit. You get all sweaty. Technology is my kryptonite. Luckily, I have a 14-year-old son who's pretty good at that stuff. So I rely on him a lot. So it's a pretty cool relationship. But yeah, so I have a website. It's called teamglass.com, and then on Instagram it's Team Glass as well. Just one S. Don't make an ass out of me. Yeah. So
that's good. It's easy to remember. I'm nervous to hear not nervous, but excited is more the word. What's the next adventure, my friend?
Yeah, so I'm just starting getting into the long distance endurance stuff. And so 2 weeks ago, I did the Leadville 100-mile mountain bike race. And so next year, I hope to do what's called the Lead Man. And so it's all of the races in Leadville. So it's a marathon run, a 50-mile run, a 100-mile bike ride, 10K run, and then a 100-mile run after that. So it's a series of events that take place next year. And so it's all at pretty high altitude at Leadville, Colorado. So yeah. And then there's always a space exploration too, so, never know.
You never know. Leadville, that's where Twin Lakes is at, where all the collegiate are, right? Yeah. I've taken my boys camping there. We actually found a dispersed space campsite, not a campsite, but it was dispersed camping, right? Pooping in the woods. Literally, we had a straight on view of Mount Albert. And then we fished at Twin Lakes and hiked, and it was one of the most memorable things ever. But well, listen, man, I'm just going to throw this out there and see if, I would say probably over the next 12 to 18 months, my family will be traveling to Little Rock, Arkansas to go check out the Razorbacks and to go check out the university. I would love to get our families together to break bread.
That would be awesome. That would be great.
Awesome.
You have all my information.
Awesome. Dude, you've been a blessing, man. I love everything that we talked about. Obviously the beginning, where you talked about the incident, and then what it was like for you growing up, and then, moving into college and, experiencing basketball and making up for old times. And then that turned into Ironman racing, and then mountain climbing, and now this as well. And you are truly an inspiration, my friend. And I have just thoroughly enjoyed interviewing you. And I know the audience loved hearing about you. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hope everyone has a great week.
You bet, my friend. Gentlemen, for all the links, not to worry, we're going to have everything in the show notes for you. Just head on over to thedadedge.com/394. And by the way, happy Halloween. Thedadedge.com/394 for this show. Jeff, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you back. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.